Module 4, Mechanical Design Lab. Hi, Joe Cerrone. Today we're going to look at creating this mechanical drawing for Module 4. And as we look at this module, you have your choice of either creating the mechanical drawing or the architectural floor plan. So we're going to start off with this mechanical drawing, and it's taken from the problems at the end of Chapter 8. We're going to start off by downloading a title block. And so we'll go to all of our title blocks and we'll download a B-size mechanical title block. And then we'll open that file. And so here is our title block. And what we're looking at is paper space in the layout mode. This red polygon shape is a viewport, and what that'll do is it'll allow us to see what we draw in model space. And so we'll draw our object in model space. The object looks basically just like this. It's just a rectangle with some geometry in it and then some dimensions. And so we're going to take a look at the numbers, and all of the numbers are imperial units, and they're all within 1 inch or a half of an inch. And so we're going to set up a grid and a snap by going to make sure that we have our menu bar enabled, and so it's already on, so I don't need to hide it. That's what this menu bar up here is. And then if I go to Tools, Drafting Settings, Snap and Grid, I can turn the snap and the grid on, and I'm going to set that at 0.25, and I'll leave the grid at 0.5. I like to leave polar tracking enabled, and I'll use these increment angles of 15 degrees, and so every 15 degrees I'll get a tracking line. And then object snap, we'll leave it on with endpoint, midpoint, and center, and intersection, and OK. So that's our grid, and then we're going to draw on the object line layer, and what we're going to do is we're going to draw this as a rectangle, and then we'll fillet the corners. Alrighty, so we're going to start off with a line, and we're going to just go ahead and enable that, and then we'll bring it to a point, and we'll track that to the right. We'll type in 8, and then we'll track that north, and we'll say 5. And remember, with polar tracking on, you don't have to use an input coordinate like at 8 less than symbol 180 degrees. That would be how we used to have to put in the dimensions before polar tracking, and here's our polar tracking. With polar tracking, we just point it in the direction we want to go and then type in that distance, and so we'll say 5, enter, and then we'll hit escape to pick up the pen. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put these radiuses on the corners. The radiuses are 1 inch, and so we'll go to our fillet command under modify right here. If you remember, if you hover long enough, it will give you help screens on it. And so we'll say fillet. We'll hit the down arrow and we'll say radius. We'll type in 1.0, and now that the cursor is changed to a selection cursor, we can then go ahead and put the fillets on the corners. Alright, now that we have the fillets created, what we're going to do is we're going to make this little T-slot down here in the bottom, and it's located 2 inches from the edge, and then another 1 inch, and then there's a 2-inch gap, and then there's another 1 inch, and then we're going to offset 1 inch up and 1 inch up. So we'll use the offset command here. we'll say offset. We'll type in 2. We'll offset this line to the right. Hit escape. We'll grab that line and extend that down. And then we'll offset that 1 inch. And then we'll offset that 2 inches to get to this next part. And then 1 inch. We can trim these lines so that they're at the correct place. So we'll say trim, and then when we click on those endpoints, we can trim that. And we can trim this little bit out of the middle here too, like that. And then we'll offset the verticals, 1 inch and 1 inch. Offset 1, select the line and then the side, and then like that. And this one will extend out. We'll just grab it with a grip. We can trim it with a grip as well. And you could trim these with grips as well, but I'm going to use trim. So we'll trim those, and then we'll trim this. You can just kind of glide through them. It's kind of like a weed whacker. And that's how that geometry should look. We'll hit escape to bail out of that command. And then we'll create this geometry here, which is located 1.5 inches from the top line. And then the distance between the two circular features is 5 inches. And then that circular feature is a 1 inch diameter. That's a diameter symbol, offset 1.5 inch from the left side. So we'll say offset 1.5, select the line and then the side. And this one's also 1.5 from the other side, so I'm going to get that one too. And then we're going to offset this line here 1.5 down. Then we're going to draw a 1 inch diameter circle at the intersection here and here. Center diameter. Specify the center point. We can use an O snap or you can use a regular snap. And then when it's asking me for the diameter, I'm going to say 1. And then I'm going to repeat that. And it remembers the last diameter or radius, and so you don't have to type it in again. You can just hit the enter key. And then I'm going to erase my construction lines. Alright, so all our geometry has now been created, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the dimensions on using a dimension layer. And so the title block comes complete with these different layers here. And so we're going to invoke the dimension line layer, and then we're going to go to the dimension command for a linear dimension, and we're going to go from this endpoint to this endpoint, and then we're going to just place that right there. You can turn off the grid. You don't necessarily need to see that. And so there it is. I'm going to make this a little darker so it's a little easier to see against the white background. I'll still keep it as a green. And so we have this 8 inch dimension, and then we'll just kind of work through to get the other dimensions. Now there are center marks here, and so the way to put a center mark on is to go to the center line layer, go to the annotate tab, and use the center mark tool. And so if you click on this center mark tool, you can then click on the line, and you actually have to touch the geometry, and it's actually an arc. And so we would click on the geometry for that, and click on that geometry for that. Go back to the home tab, switch back over to the layer of dimensions, and then let's put in the other two dimensions. And so we have a dimension from this endpoint here, And you can see the O snap or the regular snap is fighting me. It won't get to the end point. It goes close, but it doesn't go there. And so you can turn off regular snap, but leave O snap on. And then when you dimension, you can get the endpoint here, and you can get the endpoint here, and then you can place that dimension. We can then repeat that same technique where we'll go from the endpoint here to the endpoint here, and we'll place that dimension. And then we'll put the last one, which is, well, actually it's the vertical dimension here. And so we'll start to work our way around here to dimension. And what this means is it means linear dimension. Linear meaning horizontal or vertical. And so it just depends on the order in which you pick the points. And so if we pick this point here, and then this point here, and then we go off to the side, and it looks like we're slightly off here. And so let's see what's going on with that. If I offset this line 1.5, yeah, we should be exactly in the right spot here. It looks like it's right. I'm just going to put that circle in geometry again. And I'm just going to copy this. From here. And I'm going to say 5 inches. And let's try that again. There we go. So we have our dimensions. Sometimes you will get that. You can explode a dimension and edit it, but you're not supposed to. And so what we talk about with that is if we were to say exploding a dimension, we could explode it, which would turn it into text, and then you could change the numbers there as well. And so you could change that if you needed to. But that's not the desired way to edit your dimensions. It's sort of an old school way of correcting it if you have a mistake on it. All right, let's put in the last of the dimensions and complete this drawing. And so we'll go from this endpoint here to this endpoint here. We'll place the dimension there, and then we'll place the other dimensions. Notice how I'm careful to check that I'm creating the dimension line from the endpoints of the blue lines, not from the endpoints of the green lines, which would be the extension lines. And then some of my perfectionist tendencies start to take over a little bit here. And then we've got 4 inches from here to here. And then we want to put in our 2 radial dimensions, one for this radius and one for this radius. And so we'll use a radial dimension, and we'll click on that line and we'll bring that over. It puts a center mark on top of the part there. You can kind of see it if you click on it. If we hit escape and we go to properties, we can tweak that center mark a little bit. So Here's our lines and arrows, and it says that it's a center mark, and if I make it a center mark with just a mark, it'll be a little smaller. And so you can see there's that small center mark, just like in the book. And then to get it to have 4 times, what we would do is we would double click on it, and then we would edit that text, and you'll move it to the left so that it doesn't explode the text, and then we'll say 4x, green check mark. And then we'll put in our other radial dimension. So we'll come back here to radial dimension, we'll select that, we'll bring that over, we'll double click on that, bring that over, 2x, green check mark. And then I noticed as I'm looking at it that I missed some of the slot geometry right here. And so it's got a slot from halfway to the top here. And so what we'll do is we'll just draw a line on the object line layer from this point right here at that intersection to this point right here. It's the same as a tangency point, so you don't have to, as long as the geometry is true, meaning that it's a relationship that exists, like quadrant or intersection, we can work with that. And then we'll draw another line. And with this line here, what we'll do is we'll take this one out. And so it doesn't look like we're going to be able to take this out in, well, let's see, we can pull this back. And so we can grab that. There we go. And that way we still have that geometry. And then we'll draw a line and trim. And there we go. Alrighty, so we've got our geometry drawn in. We've got everything pretty well set. If you want, you can extend this one out just a little bit more. And then we're going to take a look at the title block. And so since we use the B-size title block, when we click over to the layout, we're going to double click in this viewport. I'm going to say View, Zoom, All. And there's the geometry that we created. And we're going to dial that in so that we have that at full scale. And so we're going to go and say 1:1. And we'll bring that down. We can bring this in at half scale, or we can bring those dimensions in. Let's go with half scale. That looks fine. We'll lock the viewport, double click, and then we'll put the title here. We're going to call this slot plate. Be sure to put your name on it. The scale here is 1=2, or half. And this is lab number 4. We'll call it 4A. Alrighty. We'll save it. And then we'll submit that to our downloads. Remember, when you save these files, we're going to save those as a drawing type, DWG file. And then when we submit those, we'll submit those in the assignments folder to module 4. I'm going to do this as a student. Again, here's how you'll be graded. Add a file, locate the file. It's in my downloads. And then if you have any comments, you can add those comments there. Alright, we'll get a little balloon that says we've successfully submitted the file. And that completes our Module 4 exercise, creating this mechanical drawing.